Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Genevieve Collins, Texas Director and spokesperson for Americans for Prosperity. Genevieve, thanks so much for joining me again.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks, Brittany.
We're thrilled to have you, and we are less than a week away from Donald Trump taking on his second term. And according to polls, he won back in November because more voters thought he was better equipped at handling the economy than his challenger. The economy continues to be a top issue facing Americans, and today I specifically want to talk to you about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Provisions from the legislation, which was signed into law back in 2017, are set to expire at the end of 2025. So first, what are some of those cuts that would disappear, say no action is taken, and it was not extended?
So the cuts that would happen, well, let me rephrase, there wouldn't be cuts, there would be tax hikes on every income bracket in America. The problem is that Americans have just lived through a global pandemic, 4 years of inflation. The numbers just came out this morning that inflation went up over 3 months in a row, and Americans are paying on average $1,200 more per month than they were in January of 2021. So rents are up, home prices are up, interest rates are up, gas, food, everything is up. And if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act does not get renewed, it will be a tax hike on every single American. The average dollar value will be about $1,500, but by each state, that number changes. If you're in Pennsylvania, that number is about $2,300. In Texas, the tax hike on every family would actually be $2,870 more dollars on their federal income taxes than previous years. People just can't afford to have those tax hikes if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 does not get renewed. Secondly, one thing that I really want to call out is that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act really did a great thing for small businesses, mid-sized businesses, sole proprietorships, and entrepreneurs. There was a provision in there that was the qualified business loan allotment, and that allowed for sole proprietorships, small businesses to deduct 20% of their income annually. That provision goes away. So imagine a 20% increase on small businesses that are just working to keep going and have been over the last 4 years. That's another massive that would happen, just as a couple examples.
The response to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, as you know, has been a mixed bag since 2017. It's a mixed bag now as the extension might happen, might not happen. I want to talk about the positives first, or the positive response. The Tax Foundation wrote this back in March of 2024. If Congress does nothing, most Americans will face higher taxes, worse incentives for work and investment, and a more complicated tax system starting in 2026. Americans for Prosperity just launched a $20 million ad campaign in support of the extension. So you're in support of it, as you said in the first answer here. So can you dive a little deeper and talk more specifically about how this affects and helps small businesses and the everyday American?
Well, small businesses get hurt first and worst. And small businesses, whether you're Kamala Harris or or Donald Trump on the campaign trail, both are talking about small businesses being the backbone of America. These are farmers, not just app developers or merchants. This makes up the majority of American businesses, and for these folks to not be able, like I mentioned earlier, to deduct 20% of their income, it doesn't matter what party affiliation you're a part of. You just want to be able to successfully run your business at a scale that you can afford and be able to make a profit. And so that's what Americans for Prosperity is really trying to highlight, is that this is absolutely a nonpartisan issue, or should be, because this is an American issue. We understand that people have really suffered financially over the last 4 years through a number of economic factors. I think the election demonstrated that people want a really robust economy. And that's what this incoming administration has to prove. Now, what we're trying to say is that this is an American issue, And it doesn't matter where you are in, socioeconomic life cycle. It just matters that you get to participate at a price that you can afford and be able to curate your version of the American dream.
And as we noted, the economy was a top issue facing voters in November. It's a top issue for Americans on both sides of the aisle now. I do want to talk about a pushback to this a little bit. The Treasury Department found that if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act were extended, it would cost $4.2 trillion over the next decade. And both Republicans and Democrats are concerned about hiking up the deficit. So what do you say to that argument?
I say that the government needs to stop spending dollars they don't have. The government is so good about spending money, not necessarily bringing in extra money. We shouldn't be charging taxpayers more because our federal legislators like to spend more of their money. I think more than anything, this is the time where we have to, as Americans, say we need to tighten our belt and we need to have some accountability on all of the wasteful government spending. It's not that we don't want to fund important projects, it's just that we need to prioritize that spend so that it does the most good across the majority of Americans.
And Democrats said this back in 2017, and they are saying this again now, that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act unequally affects top earners and it helps those at the top. And this is from the Treasury Department's report. Quote, evaluated as if the extension occurred in 2025, this scenario would cut taxes by an average of 2.2% of after-tax income for all families. However, the largest tax cuts would go to the highest income families. And CNBC broke down the numbers further, reporting that the average family saves $2,000 a year, but the highest 0.1% family could save approximately $314,000. So when you hear those numbers, you hear that disparity of everyday Americans save $2,000 a year, which that is a lot. That does help families. The top earners save $314,000. Do you think that's a fair trade?
I think the reality is we need to make sure all Americans get some relief. All Americans have experienced, like I mentioned, the most spending that they've ever had over the last 4 years. I mean, the numbers this morning, CNN dropped $1,179 per month has been added to everyone's expenses because of inflation. So from a tax perspective, the top earners are certainly paying more in. Do they need a disproportionate amount of tax relief? I'm not here to argue that. I'm here to just make sure that every American actually gets relief. Because at the end of the day, regardless of your income bracket, you don't deserve to have to pay more while getting less. And that's really what we've gotten over the last few years. And people are tired of that. They really need financial help. And that's what this last election, I think, was really about.
I would love to ask you about additional numbers that just dropped in your state of Texas this week. The Texas Comptroller announced this week that the state's budget has close to a $24 billion surplus. A, how did that happen? And B, do you think that the federal government coming in can take a page out of Texas's book here?
Oh, Brittany, you are singing my language. If only the federal government worked as well in terms of fiscally responsible budgeting and spending, my God, we could have a surplus. We are now in Texas 2 years in a row having a surplus. In 2023, we had a $32 billion surplus. And this year, we're going to have almost $24 billion surplus. I think every state can take a page out of Texas's book in terms of the regulatory environment, in terms of our tax code, because we have no state income tax, we have no corporate income tax, we have high property taxes, which people argue about all the time. But how can we really look to expand the Texas financial model across the country? We think that here in Texas, and like every Texan, we love talking about how great Texas is, but we think that our model works incredibly well here, and that Texas doesn't create one size fits all solutions. We really work to look at a 30 million person population and make our financial decisions in effect work for everybody. So we're pretty excited about that. And And I think that Texas has done a great job of leveraging multiple industries, tech, energy, um, all sorts of all sorts of financial and other sectors, being able to really add a ton of value. And we had more revenues than we expected, and so therefore we have a great surplus.
And to that point, I mean, because we were talking earlier about the deficit, and I had to double check that that was $1 billion, not million, $1 billion surplus, to almost $24 billion surplus. If you
No.
could have 5 minutes talking with Donald Trump when he gets into office for the first 100 days, what would you say for him to do for the economy? What is your top thing that you want to see in the next 3 months?
I have three top issues. One, secure the border, because Texas has had to fund our own border security. And I think Texas taxpayers would like some of that money back, but that's a different topic. We need to make sure that we secure our border and keep all communities across America safe. Two, we need to pass NEPA reforms and permitting reforms in the energy space that will unleash American energy and that will actually ensure that our allies are energy secure while we are energy dominant worldwide. That's a great thing for America. And then repass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Make sure that Americans get some financial tax relief and have it be meaningful and have it really be for everybody.
Genevieve Collins, I appreciate the conversation today. Thank you so much, and you are welcome back anytime.
Thanks, Brittany. Great to be with you.